Virginia Satir reveals the hidden truth about parents who become emotional servants. No one sees it. You became a servant to your own child and didn't even notice. You wake up tired, not physically, but tired of trying not to make mistakes, tired of measuring your words, of calculating the tone of a message, of walking silently through your own house, afraid to disturb the very person you brought into the world. You used to be a father. You used to be a mother. Today, you're almost an emotional employee, an effective server, someone who exists only not to disappoint, someone who demands more from you than they ever embrace you. But you don't know exactly when this started. Maybe it was when your child began responding coldly, or when they started disappearing, vanishing without explanation, or when they only called when they needed something and ignored you when you were the one in need. You realized you were diminishing yourself, but thought that was part of love. You thought love meant staying silent to keep them close, accepting little for fear of losing everything, loving without receiving love back. But what you might not have realized yet is that this love isn't love. It's emotional servitude, and you have become something you never imagined, an emotional servant to your own child. Virginia Satir saw this pattern before anyone else. She saw parents folding in on themselves while outwardly pretending everything was fine. Parents who gave everything and received silence. Parents who, instead of being respected for all they had done, ended up being used for what they failed to do. She taught that within the family structure, roles often become distorted. Love turns into debt. Affection turns into obligation. The relationship becomes an emotional contract where only one side pays the price. Always you. Today, you're going to understand deeply, without judgment, without guilt, but with a courage you may have never had before. Because what you're living through is not just ingratitude, it's an invisible pattern of emotional submission, a pattern that Virginia Satir dedicated her life to exposing, and that still hides today in the quietest homes, behind the most reserved smiles, in families that look perfect on the outside, but are emotionally broken inside. Brace yourself. The truths to come won't be easy to hear, but perhaps they're exactly what you need to finally set yourself free. The emotional servant pattern, how it's born, takes root, and disguises itself as love. You weren't born to be a servant. You were born to love, guide, educate, and protect. But somewhere along the way, something broke. What began as unconditional love turned into a cycle of silent self-erasure, of giving without return, of being present without being acknowledged, of constantly striving to maintain even the smallest bond with someone who sees you only as an extension of their wants. But how does this pattern form? Why do so many loving mothers and fathers become emotional servants to their adult children? Virginia Satir explained it clearly. This pattern starts long before the first argument. In fact, it starts within you, in your own childhood, in your unhealed wounds, in the affection you never received, in the guilt you inherited. Maybe you grew up in a home full of pressure, where love was conditional, where mistakes equaled rejection, and you swore to yourself your children would never go through what you did, so you overcompensated. You gave everything. You gave what you had and what you didn't. You gave presence, support, patience, but most of all, you gave too much permission. You allowed disrespect in the name of love. You allowed coldness to avoid breaking the bond. You allowed emotional blackmail out of fear of seeming absent. And your child learned. They learned that all it takes to control you is pulling away. That one look of disdain is enough to break you. That one moment of silence sends you chasing after them. They learned your love has no boundaries, and so they began using it as a tool for power. This pattern settles in slowly. It doesn't start with shouting. It starts with small concessions, with repeated excuses. He's just going through a phase. All teenagers are like that. He doesn't hug me, but he loves me. She's cold, but that's just her way. And when you notice, you've stopped asking for affection. You've stopped saying how you feel. You've stopped being who you were. Now, you live based on what they expect, what they tolerate, what might drive them away. And this pattern disguises itself as love. You convince yourself that love means this, that parents should give, even without appreciation, that as long as your child is okay, you can forget yourself. But this is not love. This is emotional servitude. It's a toxic cycle, a prison built from guilt, fear, and silence. Virginia Satir once said, "Many parents spend their entire lives trying to give their child the love they never received, and in doing so, they hand over their own identity." But you can still escape this pattern. You just have to recognize it first. And that's exactly what we're about to do now. Virginia Satir's perspective on false family roles. Virginia Satir saw the family as a living system, not just a collection of people, but a network of interconnected emotional roles. Each person acts, consciously or not, according to what the environment demands, or rather, what the environment allows. And when the environment is dysfunctional, marked by guilt, fear, emotional deprivation, or rigidity, the roles become distorted. Emotional masks, characters. We wear them to survive, but they end up suffocating us us from within. Satir identified many of these roles, but 3 of them appear alarmingly often in emotionally unhealthy families. The placator, the one who lives to avoid conflict, always says yes, always apologizes, even when not at fault. The blamer, the one who accuses, demands, criticizes, acts superior, but deep down is terrified of their own vulnerability. The super reasonable, the one who ignores emotions, uses logic to justify the unacceptable, hides behind cold rationalizations. And guess what? The emotionally servant parent usually takes on the role of the placator. They're the one constantly trying to keep the peace, even if it costs their mental health, who accepts everything, blames themselves for everything, and believes that love means never standing up for yourself, who thinks, if I do everything right, maybe he'll love me back. And the child often takes on the role of the blamer. Cold, harsh, demanding, doesn't tolerate mistakes, doesn't acknowledge efforts, feels entitled to endlessly punish for mistakes, real or imagined, from the past. And so the cycle forms. You beg for love, they demand perfection. You give in, they pull away. You erase yourself, they dominate. These roles are invisible, but powerful. They shape gestures, silences, and glances. You don't realize it, but you're performing. They don't realize it, but they're controlling. And over time, these roles become identity. You no longer even know who you are outside the role of the mother who accepts everything, or the father who fixes everything. Virginia Satir said, the problem isn't the role you were given. It's believing that role is all you are. And maybe now is the time to ask yourself, what role are you playing in your family? Does it empower you or crush you in silence? Signs that you're living this role. You might think you're just being a good parent, a kind, patient, altruistic person. But there's a thin line between loving and erasing yourself, between supporting and fully surrendering to someone who doesn't even return your respect. And that line has already been crossed. You don't know when, but you know exactly how it feels. 1. You live in fear of disappointing your adult child. You measure your words, avoid sensitive topics. You don't talk about how you feel for fear of the reaction. You walk on eggshells in your own home or during calls, messages, and visits. Silence has become a defense mechanism, not to protect the relationship, but to avoid being hurt by someone you love. 2. You apologize for things you didn't do. Your child accuses you of being absent. You try to explain, but deep down, you feel like you have no right to defend yourself. You carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. You feel indebted, even after a lifetime of dedication and effort. 3. You accept unfair criticism without reacting. He calls you selfish. She says you never did anything for her, and you listen. You stay silent. You swallow it, because somehow you still believe you deserve it, or because you're afraid that if you speak up, you'll lose the little connection that's left. 4. You're only contacted when they need something, money, help, favors, and you go, you try, you give, even knowing that when it's your turn to need something, no one will show up. You've gotten used to being useful, because being useful is the only way you still feel part of their life. 5. You try to earn love. You give gifts, send affectionate messages, even without replies. You keep trying to hold onto a bond that only exists on your side. You settle for crumbs, an emoji, a quick call, a short visit. 6. You feel guilty for setting boundaries. Just imagining saying no makes you feel cruel. Just considering distancing yourself makes you feel selfish. You can't think about yourself without feeling guilty, because consciously or not, you've learned that your worth comes from what you give, not from who you are. 7. You don't recognize yourself anymore. Where is that confident, joyful, strong person you used to be? Now you feel drained, empty, with a growing void inside every time you try to convince yourself that this is normal. Virginia Satir said, when you have to disappear in order to keep someone close, that's not love. That's emotional survival. And the question that now echoes is, how long will you survive instead of truly live? The silent consequences: depression, anguish, abandonment of self. You believe you're protecting your child, but slowly you're losing yourself. This is the cruelest truth of the emotional servant. They don't break all at once. They fade gradually, disappear in silent installments. Give in today, stay quiet tomorrow, erase themselves the next day, until one day they wake up empty, tired, exhausted, without the will to exist. And the worst part? No one sees it. No one notices, because you're still there, present, useful, strong. But on the inside, something in you has already collapsed. The first consequence is chronic emotional exhaustion. You don't sleep well. You can't breathe peacefully. Your mind is constantly occupied. What to say, what to do, how to avoid the next conflict. You try to appear okay, but your soul is worn out from giving so much. The second is constant anxiety. You live in a state of alert. What will the next cold gesture be? When will the next demand come? You try to anticipate everything. You live in the future, trying to control the uncontrollable, and this destroys you slowly. The third is the invisible pain of not being seen. You do everything. You're always available, but you feel invisible. No one asks how you are. No one acknowledges your efforts. And it kills you inside because you know you don't deserve this emotional neglect, but you accept it out of fear of losing the little that's left. The fourth is guilt. Even while suffering, you still believe it's your fault, that you failed, that you weren't a good enough parent. You even blame yourself for what the other did, and that guilt paralyzes you. It stops you from changing. It traps you in a cycle that hurts you, but now feels inevitable. And the deepest of all, self-abandonment. You stopped taking care of yourself. You stopped dreaming. You stopped living for yourself. Everything revolves around the other, what they need, what they want, what they might think, and yourself got lost somewhere in the past. You don't even remember who you were before living to please someone who doesn't care. Virginia Satir once said, "The greatest emotional tragedy is a person abandoning themselves in the name of a love that only exists in their own mind." You don't have to live like this. You weren't born to be used. You weren't made to pay for love with silence and suffering. But to escape this prison, you'll need to do what many fear: break the pattern. How to break the pattern and rebuild your identity. You've spent so much time trying to be everything to your child that you forgot you were someone before they even existed. You used to be whole. You had dreams, desires, boundaries, wants, but misunderstood love slowly dissolved you. Your role as mother or father grew so much that it swallowed who you really are. It's time to find yourself again. Virginia Satir deeply believed that every human being can change, even after years of living in a toxic pattern. But for that, she said, courage is essential. Courage to see what you never wanted to see. Courage to say what you've always silenced. Courage to step out of the role you were given and return to who you are. 1. Acknowledge that this love is hurting you. Love should never cost your dignity, nor your peace, nor your mental health. Recognizing that your bond with your child is sick doesn't mean rejecting love. It means saving what could still be healthy. It means no longer confusing a bond with a prison. 2. Accept that the other person may never change. You can change, but they might not, and that's okay. Virginia used to say, waiting for the other to change so you can be happy is giving your freedom to someone who doesn't even know how to care for their own life. You can choose to leave the cycle, even if they keep repeating it. 3. Start saying no, not with anger, not for revenge, but out of self-respect. Each no you say with love and firmness sends a message to yourself. I matter too. 4. Remember who you were before this role. What were your interests? What did you enjoy doing? Who did you want to be? Slowly reclaim the spaces you let die. You don't have to stop being a parent, but you must start existing again as a person. 5. Rebuild your identity. You are not just a father, not just a mother. You are a human being with needs, with limits, with desires, with value. Virginia Satir said, I am me. In all the world, there is no one exactly like me. Everything that comes from me is authentically mine, and I choose to be me. That's it. You can choose. Choose to stop begging for love. Choose to be free from guilt. Choose to live lightly. Choose to become whole again. You've made it this far. You've faced truths you may never have dared to say out loud. You've acknowledged wounds you may have carried in silence for years, and now you're facing a choice. You can keep trying to please someone who only makes demands. Keep begging for affection where there is only coldness. Keep spinning in this cycle of guilt, fear, and broken hope. Keep believing that love means suffering in silence. Or you can choose to finally live. Or you can take a deep breath and say, for the first time in a long time, I deserve to respect myself. Virginia Satir didn't teach formulas. She taught courage. Courage to look inward, to face your own pain, to recognize the patterns you inherited, and to find the strength to say, this no longer serves me. And maybe, just maybe, what you need right now is not for your child to change, but for you to change. Your posture, your voice, your view of yourself. Maybe they'll never apologize. Maybe they'll never acknowledge all you've done. Maybe they'll never understand how deeply they've hurt you. And that's okay, because in the end, the most powerful forgiveness is the one you give to yourself. You are not what they did to you. You are not the silences you swallowed. You are not the rejection you endured. You are a whole being. You have worth. You deserve respect, especially and most importantly from those you love. Now close your eyes for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, if I had the courage, what would I do differently starting today? Start there. Because sometimes freedom begins with a simple decision to stop disappearing just to fit into the life of someone who doesn't see you.